All right. Bryan, thank you so much for taking the time to come on my podcast. I know you're a really busy man, so I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. So, why don't we just start with the question of give me some context about your life and growing up, because I think that the person you are now is the product of your childhood.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you, Shen. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Excited to talk a little bit about where I've come from, what I'm doing up these days, and where we think we're going to go. So, to give you some background on who I am and how I've gotten to this point, so I'm Bryan Bristol, 26-year-old fintech founder who's raised about $3 million to date for a company that's helping friends and family move loans to other friends and family, pretty much anywhere in the world. Grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, lived there most of my childhood. I played lots of sports, basketball, football, but I was best at lacrosse. Ended up having that be a college sport that I played, but was always into technology, was always into like learning new things, was always into just kind of like discovering the world. So grew up in Charlotte to a product of a single mother household. Me and my sister, we kind of went through the ringer that you do as a minority in kind of southern United States. So that was like a general kind of interesting time for me. Learned a lot about how to grow through life, how to get through tough challenges, how to like continue to strive and achieve while things may not be the greatest in your surroundings. So once I kind of left my upbringing and like early days in North Carolina, I went to college at a school called Bowdoin, which is a liberal arts institution in Maine. Completely different environment where it's like very cold, very like desolate and naturey, but the academics at Bowdoin is a great school, and I played lacrosse there, like I talked about, and being able to go to this school really taught me a lot about things that I didn't know. So I was able to meet a lot of different socioeconomic classes that I'd never encountered before. I was able to go through this experience where people for the first time were a lot smarter than me, and it was a really interesting environment where like I learned and grew a lot over the course of my time in college. So then after college, graduating from Bowdoin, I actually flew out west, left Maine, and went to California to start working in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is a weird kind of place that there's a TV show about it, and people talk about it on social media, but it's this community of technologists and innovators who are like trying to change the world with like very simple ideas and very simple concepts, but that have powerful impact. So I went to Silicon Valley to work first as a software engineer for a company called Pinterest. A lot of people know what Pinterest is, the big social media pin board app. But then also I worked at Intuit, which was a company that still does small business accounting and small business tax software. Their software is like TurboTax and Mint and QuickBooks, which is pretty cool. So I did that for a couple of years, building technologies as a software engineer, as part of a team, learning how companies grow and scale. And after doing that, I actually decided to start Pigeon, which is my current startup during the pandemic. To give you some background on how Pigeon even came to be, Pigeon is a really cool idea where we figured out a way to make it super easy and a lot more comfortable for you to either ask for money from a friend or family member or to give money to a friend or family member. And during the pandemic, a lot of people were like really in like tough times. People were losing their jobs. People were not having the sources of income that they were having prior. So I was fortunate enough to have kept my like job as an engineer, but my family was not as fortunate. So during that time, they had actually asked me for quite a sum of money where I was just kind of uncomfortable giving that away. I wanted to be able to say, hey, look, if I lose my job, I don't really know how I'm ever going to get this money back. So is there a way I can loan you this money? And then in the future, you could just pay it back to me over some time. And at that time, there was no app, there was no website, there was no like easy one, two, three, click a button, create a loan, and have that exist with your friends and family. So I actually spent that summer during the pandemic where everyone was like at home. Everyone was just like watching Tiger King and doing absolutely nothing. And I ended up creating what was now Pigeon. So fast forward 2 years later, after creating it and putting it out on the interwebs, we're now a multi-million dollar company. We've moved millions of dollars between friends and family across the United States. I think we have 21,000 users to date now, and we've been funded by some of the biggest investors in the world, like Y-Combinator, and we're really trying to make a name for ourselves. So it's been a cool journey throughout my life. There's obviously a lot more amazing stories in between those, but excited to continue to like build and impact the world in a positive manner, and that's where we are today.
So, you said that your company has already passed through millions of dollars with loans.
Yep.
How much money are we talking? Like how much money has been transferred through it?
Yeah, so today it's about 3.1, $3.2 million. We're moving about what, 250K, almost 500K a month, and that's growing at like 30% a month. So come this time in 6 months, we'll be moving $1 million a month. And to give you perspective of how this works, you and I could go onto Pigeon, which is an app, and I could lend you $1,000, and that would exist on the platform. Our average loan size is like $6,000 or $7,000. So if you do the math, if we're moving 250K a month, 500K a month, we have quite a lot of people every month making a lot of loans to each other back and forth. We've helped people start businesses. We've helped people pay for emergencies. We've helped people even like move around their debt. People use Pigeon for all various different reasons, but our goal is to make sure that people feel supported within their relationship using their technology. We don't want people to burn bridges by trying to help one another out.
I see. So, you see Pigeon as a way of preventing problems in families? Because money usually is the root cause of a lot of these problems. Because I know in my family, at least, I've seen how lending money to another family member seems like you're helping them, but it actually creates like a massive issue.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's one of the use cases slash goals of Pigeon. So, like you said, sometimes you help out your family member and it actually makes the situation worse. And that was something I wanted to avoid way back when we were creating this. So, for Pigeon, the way we're solving this is two-part: education as well as technology. So, in terms of what we provide from a technology standpoint, you can log into our app and create the structure that you want. So, say I'm uncomfortable. I know I want to give you money, but like, when do I get paid back? How much do I get paid back? Like, do I get to have some type of legal protection? Stuff like that. We put that all in like one, two, three easy to do steps where you communicate with your friend and family member and you're on the same page at the end of the day. So once you actually have that loan on our platform, everyone knows what's going on. No one is kind of upset. No one's like stressed about, hey, do I get this money today? Do I get it tomorrow, etc. It really helps with a lot of the emotions. The next thing is the education. A lot of people don't know how to go through this process. They don't know if they need a contract. They don't know if they should charge interest rate. They don't know what to do when someone doesn't pay you back. So we have a lot of like articles and blogs and FAQs and tips to how to get through this process the right way so that you don't actually feel uncomfortable helping someone out. You actually feel a little bit empowered. You're like, oh, I could do this. I can help someone out and it'll work out in the end because I know I have all these tools. I know how to go through it. I understand this now. And that's kind of our goal as a whole.
So when you mentioned that when you make these loans, that does the app create a contract for you?
So it can. It's funny. At first, when I first created it, I thought everyone would want a contract. So I made it mandatory. It's like, oh, you can use Pigeon and you have a contract. But like halfway through our journey, people started asking, hey, I don't actually want a contract. I just want to kind of put it on the back of a napkin and keep track of it because I don't want that pressure. I don't want the legal pressure. I don't want the contract. So now our contracts are optional. I think it's what 30 to 40% of people actually add a contract to their loan, and the other 60 to 70% say I don't want a contract. I just want to be able to track things. So the way we've made Pigeon is we've made it so you can customize it however you want. If you want a contract, sure. If you want interest rate, sure. If you want a payment plan that works for you, sure. but it's up to you guys to kind of decide that on our platform.
And when people make these loans, do they say like, okay, I'll lend you $1,000, and then every month you pay me $100 back for the next 10 months, something like that?
Yep, that's exactly how it goes. And what we can then do is take it a step further. We can automatically connect to your bank account, and that'll withdraw every $100 if you want to. You can even send reminders by just clicking a button instead of having to text or call someone. So we literally make that process like so easy that it's almost a no-brainer. You'd be like, oh, why don't I try this out just to see how it works? And that's how we've been successful, at least up until today.
So I want to track back a little bit to when you were talking about like your life and stuff.
Yep.
Why did you choose entrepreneurship? Like, did you know since you were young, like, okay, when I'm older, I want to have my own business?
Yeah.
Was it something like that?
So it's funny. I've been asked this question in the past before. I don't consider myself an entrepreneur. Like the name entrepreneur, I understand it. You start a business, you grow it, you want to be able to create impact using some type of company. But for me, I always just wanted to solve problems. So I consider myself a problem solver. And one of the best ways I think in the world today to solve problems at scale, so to help a lot of people out at once, is through companies, right? So I could have created this idea for Pigeon and kept it to myself. I could have like shared it one on one with friends and family, but that wouldn't have helped out a lot of people who are struggling with this across the United States. A cool fun fact I found out while building Pigeon is there's almost $200 billion moved between friends and family as loans, and they all struggle with this weird, awkward, uncomfortable relationship aspect. So in my head, I was like, well, this is a giant problem. How do I solve this at a giant scale? And the best solution for me was you got to create a company, and you have to have this company be dedicated to solving this problem by any means necessary and getting the money to basically run your company so that you can then actually continue to solve this problem. So that's what I like to consider myself. Entrepreneur, I love the word as well, but I'm definitely more of a problem solver.
Do you have a co-founder?
Yeah, so I don't have a co-founder. Technically, I'm like a solo founder, but when I first started the company, I did start it with another woman. She currently works on the team, but she's no longer like the founder side. She's more of like a operations side. Throughout the journey, I've also had another co-founder. We got through Y-Combinator together, which is this accelerator program that helps companies like scale and grow. Since then, he's kind of shifted to his own company, so now it's just kind of me leading the helm. It's a small team. There's a handful of us across the United States, but we're really impactful. We build product really well, and it's something where we all have ownership and we create a lot of value, and we just run this thing so that people can use it and feel good about using it.
So you said a lot of people are loaning through Pigeon,
Yep.
and how do you make money? How does Pigeon make money through this?
Yeah. So we use the freemium kind of business model. So half of Pigeon's free, half of it is a paid tier. So if you're coming to Pigeon and you just want to move a couple $100s and you want it back a couple months, like we're not going to ask you for any money. I think that's kind of predatory. We want to just make sure you have the technology and do it how you want to. But if you come to Pigeon and you're trying to move $20,000, $30,000, $100,000, and you know you want special terms, and you know you want a contract, and you know you want to do it for 6 years or something like that, that's at the point where we'll ask you to pay a subscription fee. And this is called a premium loan tier. So for every month of a premium loan, we will ask you for either $6, that's how much we pay for the subscription, or we'll ask you for $3 a month if you pay up front. So say you had a loan for 3 years, you basically pay us $3 times 36 months, and then that would go in our pocket. So it's like an equitable business model where we're not trying to charge people who just want to use the software and help out their daily lives. But if you are trying to do giant expenses and move a lot of money, there is some value in using Pigeon, so we charge a small fee for that.
So you said that you founded Pigeon during COVID,
Yep.
right? So 2020,
Yep, correct.
around that time. And then At one point, and you founded it with another founder, right? Two of you decided, okay, let's start this together.
Yeah.
And then how many months later was it that you decided to apply to Y Combinator?
It was a year long journey. Um, throughout the process of, sorry. So it was a year long journey. Throughout the process of trying to figure out how to grow this company and how to scale it, I spent a year like getting investor capital. So Pigeon is a venture capital backed company. And what that means is there are people who professionally invest in companies that give us money so that we can then scale and hopefully become the next Facebook, Apple, Google, and then they obviously make a lot of money off of us. So for the first year, I tried to get that. I tried to get as many investors as possible, tried to raise our own money, etc. And I was able to successfully raise, I think, $300,000 from investors, from people that I knew, from like the networking side of the world. But it got to the point where we needed more influence. So about a year later, after I'd already created Pigeon, we basically took the kind of money that we had, all the traction that we had, all the progress that we had done as a company, and applied to YC. And in applying to YC, it's a super difficult process. It's like I think 1% acceptance rate these days, or 1.4 last batch. But it's something where you need to come to the table like understanding the problem that you're solving, what that solution is going to be, and then how to solve that over the course of your entirety. Like if you're existing as a 3-year company or 10 years or 20 years, how are you going to continue to solve this problem? So we applied, we got in. It's a 2-round process where it's a written application and then a hard 10-minute interview face to face with some really powerful and successful people. And at the end of those 2 processes, that's when you're able to apply and get through the ranks and actually join a batch. And these batches are companies where they're also successful. These are founders from all over the world. It doesn't have to be the United States. And we're all together for 3 months trying to solve our individual problems that our companies are created for. And at the end of those 3 months, you A, get a bunch of money from investors that are invested in Y Combinator, but then B, you present your company to new customers and to the press and to the public. So a collection of companies that you may know that have gone through Y Combinator, you have Airbnb, you have DoorDash, you have Coinbase, you have Instacart, a whole bunch of companies that are now giant, well-known names. And that's kind of the alumni / the group that we're a part of, where we're hoping to get to that level of success one day.
Would you say that most of the companies that apply to Y Combinator or YC for short, would you say that most of them do become successful?
I wouldn't say most. So the reason why C is so successful is because they've made an extremely hard thing, which is like building a company and making money from it, a little bit easier. So 99 out of 100 companies in general fail. One company ends up being successful out of 100. But if you go through YC, their track record thus far has turned that 99 out of 100 failure to like 93, 92 fail. So yeah, maybe the majority of us still fail, but you now have like a 10 or 20x more chance of actually succeeding. You go from like having 1 out of 100 to 8 out of 100 or 9 out of 100. And that's kind of the power of that network. Enough people in those ranks have succeeded where you can learn from them. Like at any point in time, because we're also a YC company, I can email the founder of Coinbase, or I can text the founder of Airbnb. Yeah, maybe they're not going to answer me like today or whatever, but they know that we have this shared investor, this shared community, and you do get the time of day. Like a week from now, 2 weeks from now, you could actually have a sit-down conversation with these people and learn from them, which is really cool.
So I want to talk more about your experience at YC because it's definitely just more than being able to go there for a 10-minute interview. be in a batch for 3 months with these people.
Yep.
What is it like? Because I imagine the competition is insane.
Yeah.
I imagine everyone is trying to succeed, and you're all coming up with crazier and crazier ideas. Like what is it? What is the atmosphere like there?
Yeah, I mean, it starts from day one, right? So, last batch, which was winter 2023, and that was a couple weeks ago, they had demo day. They said 20,000 founders had applied with 20,000 different companies, and 223 of them got accepted. So, it's already cutthroat from the jump. The people who got in are the people who are serious, and they're not going down without a fight. So once day one starts, it's funny. I remember not the founder, the CEO or the batch leader. His name is Michael Seibel. He got on our Zoom call with all 400 of us at the time, which was our batch size, and basically told us straight up. He was like, 95% of you guys are gonna fail. 95% of you guys are not gonna make it. That was the first words that came out of his mouth. And at that point, we were all like, oh shit. This is not easy. Like we didn't make it by getting into YC. This is just the beginning of it. So once he told us that, he was like, the way you don't become someone who fails is by doing things differently than the rest, and by succeeding more than the rest, and by trying harder, and by talking to your customers, and by doing all these things that you think you're supposed to do and you know you're supposed to do, but you don't actually do it in practice. You have to like sit down and dedicate time to interviewing your customers, to thinking about your business model, to researching how to like make more money based off of a specific feature. So once you're in the batch, we're all week by week going through our individual companies and iterating and working on these processes. So every week we're having 10-person meetings with 10 different companies, talking about our struggles, talking about our wins, talking about how we can improve. And we're all low-key trying to one-up each other. Because at the end of the batch, you have what's called Demo Day. And Demo Day is a showcase to the world saying, this is what I created in 3 months. This is the progress I made. And if you're technically in like last place, quote unquote, come Demo Day, it's not going to look good. You're going to have Forbes picking up your story, New York Times picking up your story, and it's going to be like, oh, why didn't you succeed to the same level with all these other companies? So I like to consider YC a pressure cooker. If you can get into the pressure cooker and succeed, it's a springboard to allow you to just new levels of success. Like after YC, you're at a completely different level. But if you get in the pressure cooker and you wither away a little bit, it can do some damage. It can really kind of hurt your confidence, make you reconsider whether or not you want to do this thing and understand like what your path forward is.
So, as like a person, I usually question like why, and when I just want to know all these founders that get in, if they have backgrounds, are they usually from like the top schools like Stanford? Because I know that Stanford has a bunch of startups or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
and like a crazy amount. I think it's like 500 of them of Y Combinator are from Stanford.
Mhm.
Like, is there a reason for that? Why? I don't know if you know this, but like, why is it that Stanford has so many?
So I would say this is a two-part answer. YC doesn't pick based off of pedigree. So to give you perspective, I told you I'm from middle of nowhere, Charlotte, North Carolina. Grew up poor. Went to this school named Bowdoin, who very few people know, but it is a successful school. Applied to YC one time as a black founder who's 26 years old, who had only made $1,000 based off of their business idea. And I got in, right? Don't have any of the pedigree or credentials that all the others that you're kind of noting do. So YC does not pick based off of pedigree. What they pick off of is based off of how committed you are to your idea. Are you a problem solver? Can you figure out how to find solutions to the problems that happen in the startup race? And then are you committed to doing this all the way through? Like, will you make it the amount of time you need to do in order to be successful? That's what they optimize for. And in terms of why there's so many people from Stanford or MIT or whatever school you want to name, that just comes down to network. Like enough people have gotten into YC from those schools, and they're able to teach the people who are coming up, saying, "Look, you're graduating from Stanford as a senior. If you want to get into YC, look, you're competing against 28,000, 30,000 other applicants. You got to know this, this, and this. Otherwise, you're not getting in." So it's not necessarily YC looking for Stanford people or MIT people. I have a feeling it's the exact opposite. The Stanford people and the MIT people who have gotten in are going back into their alumni communities or going back into their schools and teaching people these processes. And they're saying, this is how you become successful. And the people who are listening are end up implementing it and then getting into YC or growing their own thing outside of YC and becoming really successful.
So to sum that up, it's essentially like the Stanford grads who get into Y Combinator, they go back into Stanford and they basically put a target of this is Y Combinator, shoot your arrow towards this, and then you give them this goal and people can work towards it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think Y Combinator is just one goal, right? There are a lot of successful founders who didn't go through Y Combinator. Those are the companies still founded by Stanford grads, but they're learning. Like they're still being taught how to be successful. So whether or not you get into YC doesn't determine your success. What does matter is how you go about building your company. Are you doing it the right way? Are you making the right decisions? Those are the things that matter at the end of the day. And it just so happens that those communities really preach that stuff.
So you mentioned while explaining all that, you said these Stanford kids are being taught how to be successful in the startup space.
Yep.
There are things you need to know that obviously people don't know, and these Stanford kids are spreading. Would you tell the audience some of the things they need to know that aren't as obvious as work hard or
Yeah.
have a good idea?
Yeah, so see, that's one of the misconceptions I would say. Your second statement, have a good idea. Your idea doesn't have to be good. Your idea can be terrible. But the question is, can you figure out whether or not your idea is something people want? So if I'm building, what's a cool company, or what's a cool idea? So right, Airbnb, one of their founding stories is no one wanted to live in strangers' houses to start. They were like, why the fuck would, or I don't know if I can curse on this, sorry. Why
Oh,
in the
you can.
world?
You're
Why?
good. You're good.
Okay, cool. Why in the world would I pay money to go stay at a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere and not just go to a hotel? Like, that was a crazy concept when that came out. But the thing that they ended up discovering was like, people want to be able to stay in amazing locations, but for a cheap price. People want the ability to meet new people, but not have to be forced to go to XYZ. People want the flexibility of being able to cancel their reservations or trips like day of or day before and not have to pay fees. These were all the things that they added to Airbnb over time that allowed Airbnb to be successful, and then it came down to them marketing their idea and building that into the product itself. So over time, you don't necessarily have a bad idea or a good idea. You have an idea where you talked to the people you're trying to sell to and started to create the thing that they want. So that's like one of the giant secrets, creating things that people want. And that's what YC preaches. The next thing that you kind of have to understand is your success is not necessarily 100% in your power. Like, I can only take the company so far. You're going to need to work with people who are smarter than you, people who are better adept at doing one thing versus the other, people who have more resources than you, and you have to be really good at putting all those people in the right places so that you can continue to move forward. One of the like weird kind of things that people say about how to be successful is you have to work hard. Yeah, you have to work hard. But if you're working hard and you're not working in the right direction, you're kind of just working hard backwards or underground or to zero type of thing. You have to be able to take the time to pause and understand, am I working hard in the right direction? Am I utilizing the right resources? Am I talking to the right people? Those are all the things you have to always be considering in order to be working hard in the right direction and to succeed.
Um, so you're now in YC, and
Mm-hmm.
you just talked about the whole process of getting in, and
Yeah.
I want to know, why do they tell you why they accept you? Is that a thing they do? Like when they accept you, they say like, "Oh, hey man, this is why I accepted you."
Yeah, so that was one of the questions. They don't tell you. So it's not a like thing that they tell you. But what they do give you is this amazing relationship with your partners. And the partners are the really rich people who've already had successful companies that are helping to teach you how to be successful. So I asked my partner, who was Michael, we talked about him earlier, and I was like, why did you let us into YC? Like, why'd you pick me, et cetera, et
Wait,
cetera?
sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but Michael is the guy who started Twitch, right?
Yeah.
Co-founded Twitch or
Yeah,
something
he
like that.
co-founded
All right.
Twitch, which used to be Justin TV, and yeah, now he's the CEO or batch leader of YC. So that's Michael Siebel.
Okay.
And he was one of our partners. And in talking to him, I was like, yo, why did you let me in? Like, was it just because he liked the idea, or is it something about us? And he was just like, nah, it was simple. You're so relentlessly dedicated to understanding your customers that it was kind of a no brainer for us. We just needed to make sure that you have the resources and tools to keep doing it. And when he said that, I was like, wow, that's like so simple. Like, I didn't realize that was the thing that caught your eye. And at that time, applying, like I said, I didn't have the resources or traction, but I was like dedicated to making sure that we understood every nook and cranny of this problem so we could create the right solution. And that was the thing that really tipped him off and allowed us, at least Pigeon, to get into YC.
So all of that can be summed into like obsession. You obsessed over your company, and did you spend every waking minute just thinking about your company?
Yeah, and I still do that to this day, but like healthier now. So when I first started Pigeon, I worked my full time job as a software engineer and worked another 40 hours trying to build Pigeon. So my weeks were at least 80 hours, at least. Most weeks were like 100, maybe 120 hours. And those were eating, breathing, sleeping, building this thing. There were days where I literally dreamt like coding solutions because I'm a software engineer by trade. So like I was coding in my sleep, and I would wake up and be like, "Oh shit, this is the answer! Like this is how I create this solution." And I remember once we had gotten into YC during the batch, I was still this way. I worked so hard one week that I parked my car at the office. And a week later, I was like, oh, I gotta go to the airport. I'm going on this trip. And I had forgot I parked my car at the office that Monday. So I had thought someone stole my car. So like I was calling up the police and was like talking to my colleagues. I was like, yo, where's my car? And in the middle of Miami, my colleague is walking the streets and he's like, bro, is this your car? He sent me a text message picture. It's like, yeah, you found it. But it was just parked at the exact location that I parked it a week prior on the street. So that gives you like some perspective of how hard and how stressed I was trying to get this company to the place that it is today. And I'm not saying everyone has to work that hard and be that obsessed, but when you are working that hard and you are that obsessed, more times than not, you will come out ahead of someone else. And that's the goal, always being one step ahead of someone else. And eventually you'll end up on top.
So after talking about like that story, your work-life balance was just work,
Yeah.
no life. It was
Yeah.
just work. And I think that's like a really important thing because many people, well, my age, in college and high school, mid early 20s, they all think, well, I'm young, why don't I have fun now and work hard later?
Yeah.
And they say, oh, having a life is really important. I need some time to rest. What do you think about that?
I think there's different strokes for different folks. So some people do need that balance to succeed. For me, I'm just built a different way where it's like I can just keep going and keep going until I get to the finish line. But some people need that balance where they take care of themselves so they can work more efficiently, that they can work better, and they can enjoy the work that they're doing. And I commend those people. I think that's a great, healthy way to go about it. But there's multiple ways to kind of create the life that you want. The one kind of common trait of all this is the dedication and commitment to it. If you don't have the dedication and commitment to it, it doesn't matter if you're relaxing at the beach or if you're just working 125 hours a day. Like, you're not going to get there because you aren't committed to the cause. So that's the underlying key. You can have the life that you want, but you have to constantly be working on it. Because there are some companies where they slowly worked on it for 10 years, and then one day it just blew up. I don't quote me on this, but I think MailChimp is one of those. MailChimp is a 25-year-old company, and the founder just worked on it as a side hustle for I think 7 or 8 years. And then at year 8, he finally was like, oh, this is making some money. Let's see if we can make this bigger. And now MailChimp sold into it for like $3 or $4 billion 14 years after his 8 years of just working on it. So there's a lot of different paths.
So you mentioned this like constantly working, dedication, keep on working. I wanted to ask you this as like for me at least, when this might be off topic, but when I try to go to sleep,
Yeah.
it's I don't know if you're the same, which is why I'm asking this. When I try to go to sleep, it's so difficult for me to go to sleep because when I go to sleep, I feel like I could have done something more. I could have worked harder. Sleeping is kind of, I don't know, kind of for pussies, you know, like
Yeah.
if I'm trying to sleep or like sometimes I try to go to sleep and then an idea pops in my head and then
Yeah.
I have to get up and start working on that. Do
Yeah.
you feel this? Does that happen to you as well?
Yeah, when I first started, I used to get those sparks of like ideas and innovations all the time. I would say like you can't do it forever because then you'll never be able to sleep and then you can't actually function in your day to day. But when you're first starting and you have that like zeal and passion and energy, I'd say act on it. It's just like you're so in the zone that the ideas that are coming to your head right before you're going to sleep are probably the ones that you want to keep doing and keep implementing. So I think that's a power that people should definitely use, and you should continue to utilize to your advantage. Because not everyone is going to sleep thinking of the next big idea. A lot of people are kind of saying, "Oh, well, I'm kind of done for the day. I'll pack it up. I'll try it again tomorrow," type of thing. And if you can get ahead, that's the name of the game. Always being able to advance and improve.
So you talk about this thing where you have too many ideas. You just mentioned like when you have too many ideas, it's difficult to focus on like the path, right?
Yeah.
What advice would you give me if let's say for this podcast, every time I'm going to sleep, I have like more ideas of what I could branch, like how I could branch it out
Yeah.
and make it a little bit bigger. What advice would you give me if I'm trying, well, what advice would you give me to try and focus up and like stop worrying about all the other ideas?
So it's two part. You don't have to necessarily not focus on the other ideas. What you should do is try out every idea just a little bit. So whether it's just talking to someone about it or creating it or even giving it more time than you usually would, those are great ways to test your ideas. Because some of the best inventions, like not even tech companies, just like random inventions, happen by accident. I think like the peanut has like 255 different ways to use it with George Carver. And like half of those are just accidents. He was just like, oh, what happens if I throw a peanut in there? And he's like, oh, that's crazy. Like now we have this new invention. So one of the things I would preach and kind of challenge you to do is if you have an idea and you haven't explored it, so you haven't asked someone, what do you think? Or you haven't actually created it or put it out there in the test, do one of those 3 or 4 or 5 different things. Because you never know which one is going to be the one that sticks that allows you to be super successful. And that's my 2 cents on that.
So you mentioned that you should try everything, and I resonate with that because I think do you think that taking action is the most important part? Because people always argue um, idea versus execution, which one's more important? When I was younger, I used to think the idea was more important, but then lately I've realized execution is, well, for me at least, execution is really important. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the exact quote, but there's some quote where it's like, perfection is the enemy of good enough. Customers, the people who are going to buy your products or ideas, or your investors or your employees, they don't need perfection. People need just good enough. And you don't know where the line is for just good enough. So instead of trying to figure it out yourself and get it all the way to the finish line, put it out the minute you think all right, this could work. Where it's like, you need to do things by hand and it breaks every once in a while, but if you just hold it together with some duct tape and glue and wish that it kind of makes it to the finish line, that might be just enough of an idea and a concept to really move you to the next step. So that's one of the things I would say where it's like, don't focus on trying to get to a level of perfection. Focus on just being good enough. Because for us, and going back to the YC application, we weren't a perfect company. We weren't making millions of dollars. I was me. It was just me as a one-person team, but we still had just good enough to get in, and that got us to the next stage. And then now we're working on this stage that will get us to the next stage.
So then, you said you're a one-person team. What is it like being a solo founder? Because with me doing this podcast, I find it's kind of like difficult if it's just one person, you know? So like how is it like for you in a startup which is more stressful as a single person? There's no one to talk to, there's no sounding board.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely difficult. I would say one person team tests all of your capabilities. Like, how good am I creating things? How good am I at making decisions? Like, you don't have anyone to blame, it's just you. So, for me, going through that process, I kind of like the challenge. So, having me as my own solo founder to begin with was a little exciting. But in terms of getting the support and being able to talk about your ideas, sometimes you gotta reach outside of the kind of tech and founder community. Like if you're just talking to your buddy who knows nothing about tech and you're just kind of venting to him, that's like helpful and it's powerful. Some people like to go to therapy route. I think that's powerful as well. And then if you're in the startup community and the founder community, reach out to other founders. Like at the end of the day, like I was at lunch with a founder here in Miami just a couple days ago, and we didn't talk about like, oh, how successful you are, how successful you want to be. We talked about like all the crazy stuff that we go through, all the like really pain points and lows where it's like, yeah, this person had to lay off half their community, or not half their community, half their company 3 weeks ago. Like that's a terrible feeling, and just being able to talk to that with someone who's also a founder is super powerful. So if you're doing it solo, being able to branch into the network of people who are also doing this thing with you. Like if you're a podcaster, talk to other podcasters. If you're an engineer, talk to other engineers. But then also give yourself perspective. Like don't talk to podcasters all the time. Talk to people who are kind of in the restaurant space and be like, hey, I'm just doing my own thing. We're trying to make money. I love your encouragement. Or even just talk to your friends and family because like they want you to succeed and want to see you successful. So it's about creating your network and creating your support system the way that you feel comfortable doing it.
Okay, so you said you were talking to your friend and did you say you talked to a friend who didn't have anything to do with tech as well?
Yeah, yeah.
So talking to both another founder and then a friend who doesn't have anything to do with tech, this might be like not on topic, but I'm sure you've heard of the saying, the sum of the five people you spend the most time with is who you are. Do you think that that is 100% true and the people on this in this world would be much more successful if they could just change the people they hang out with?
I don't say it's 100% true, right? Because it takes away the ability to grow. Like I could hang out. I used to have a completely different circle of people I hung out with, what, 3 years ago, 2 years ago? And those people are still called friends, and I love them to bits and pieces. But there's a point at which like they grow in one direction, I grow in another direction. We all grow in separate directions. So now you get a new circle of five, and then you'll grow again, and you'll get a new circle of five. So I think having a circle of people that are around you, yes, can help grow you in your career and motivate you, but it's not the end all be all. Like you're the controller of your own life. You'll determine where you grow and where you don't grow. Having the support system and the network around you to get to the place that you want to is super important, and that's something you want to optimize for. But at the end of the day, it boils down to you. Like, where are you going to put yourself? What are you going to learn? How are you going to get there? And how are you going to execute that?
So I want to go back to when you were saying that the guy you had lunch with had to lay off half the people in his company 3 weeks
Yeah.
ago,
Hmm.
something like that. People don't know about the lows of what it's like starting a startup. Everyone thinks it's all rainbows, sunshine and rainbows. You get into Y Combinator, it's like a pot of gold.
Yeah.
But how what is it like actually in Y Combinator when you like fail? Because
Yeah.
I imagine there's a lot of failure there.
Yeah. Yeah. So to give you perspective, it's actually a she. She's a female founder, and she didn't go through Y Combinator. She raised $6 million without Y Combinator, and ended up hiring 9 employees. But she is specifically in the crypto space, and crypto is not going through a good time right now. So she had to go from 9 employees to 3 employees, which is
Hmm.
super tough. Like having to tell 6 people, "Hey, you lost your job." Even like I struggle to this day just communicating to my employees, "Oh, we didn't have as great numbers as we thought we would, but you're not getting laid off." It's just like you might not get a bonus or you might not get a raise. Like those conversations are tough. So going through the founder journey day by day, it's not always rainbows and sunshine. I would say you're lucky if it's 50% of the time it's rainbows and sunshines. It's not always dark cloud and gloomy days either. Sometimes it's somewhere in between where you like kind of lie in that spectrum. So for me, I try to stay level headed. If we get a giant win, great. Love that. Enjoy the day, but tomorrow we got to get back to work. If the whole company falls apart one day, which actually did happen a couple weeks ago, we had millions of dollars in a bank account with Silicon Valley Bank, and it
Oh wow.
Silicon Valley Bank went under, and from Thursday of that week to Friday the next day, we had no money. Like we literally could not pay any employees because all of our money was tied up in that bank. So those are the times where you're like, well, shit, what the fuck do I do? And everything falls apart. But you can't let it change the direction and where you're trying to go. So I actually spent that whole weekend just thinking through. I was like, all right, what can we do? How can we get some more money? Let me listen to the news. Will they pay it back out, etc. And instead of panicking and throwing it all away, come Monday morning, funny enough, we all got bailed out, quote unquote. Like people got their money back, everything was good to go, and I didn't have to say or do anything that I would have regretted years from now, because we were able to just be patient and take that win and take that loss the same way and continue to move forward towards the goal. So it's a lot of being able to manage your own expectations and just getting through the tough times, but also the good times, and making sure you're staying committed.
I love what you just said about not making excuses because I think people right now need to understand that when there is a problem, you shouldn't make excuses,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially in the startup space, you
Yep.
should. There's always a way around something, and excuses never work. Have you seen excuses destroy companies before in Y Combinator? Or like, how does
Yeah,
it happen?
yeah. So specifically about Y Combinator, I think this is just companies in general. So whether you're in YC or not in YC, the minute you start to make excuses and pass off blame is probably the minute you should start thinking, "Oh, are we doing the right thing here? Like, is this actually the way that we want to go about this?" Because at the end of the day, the ball stops with the founder or the CEO, whoever is the person in charge of the company. And if you're not taking ownership for it, there's something a little wrong there from like a ethical or like moral standpoint. So there are big examples of companies and founders who stopped taking ownership. One, for example, is FTX. Sam
Hmm.
Bankman-Fried is this giant billionaire who had made millions and billions of dollars in the course of 3 years. And then all of a sudden, one day, he gets kind of outed in Twitter, and people are like, "Oh, is this actually happening?" And he does not take ownership for it. So, in him not taking ownership for it, the company fails. He then gets put in front of the courts and the justice system, and he has to kind of retract and basically say, "Look, I didn't take ownership for this. I lied about it." And to this day, he's still kind of dealing with this like personal reputation loss, and also the company that he lost, and everything that kind of goes into that formula. So being able to say, hey, there's no excuses. I fucked up, or I did this, or even if I didn't personally cause this to happen, we missed the ball here. That allows you to then ask for help. Because at that point, you're not blaming people. You're saying, hey, look, this happened. Where do we go from here? And that's about moving forward and how do we continue to grow and exist.
So you're talking about accepting ownership, and I wanted to ask you, founders and successful people in this world, because you've met a lot of them, what traits do you see in them? Because I don't know if you know Alex Hormozy, but he said that three big traits in the highly successful people is they have a superiority complex, they have a massive insecurity of failing, and then they have amazing impulse control. Do you
Yeah.
have any traits you can add to that, or do you have any traits that, from what I just said, you don't think are true?
That's funny. So I think they're all true in a sense. Like if I were to add up all those traits into one word, to me that's just resilience, right? You're too scared to fail, so therefore you have to continue to be resilient.
Mm-hmm.
The other two traits are like byproducts of how you continue to stick through the journey. So I would agree. Like if he's describing this as in order to be successful as a founder, you need to continue to do it. That's like trait number one. I think resilience is definitely that. Number two, I wouldn't say you have to have it in order to be successful, but it helps. Being able to understand other people's superpowers. So you're never
Mm-hmm.
going to be the best at everything, but there is someone who will be the best at something that you're looking for. Being able to find that person and convince them to help you do the things you want to do, that changes the game for you. Because if you can create a super team of people who are really good at the things that need to be done, no one's stopping you. Like you have the best of the best for all the things that you need. So I think that's an amazing skill to have and something that people should really prioritize. There's a book that I like to recommend and how to understand this. There's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And people,
Mm-hmm.
Dale Carnegie, one of the best businessmen to ever exist. That's a superpower that I think a lot of amazing founders do have. We convince people to do the things that we want to get done, and we convince the best of the best to do that. So that's a second trait. A third trait, I would say being open to failing is one of those things. You don't let the fear of failure stop you. So the same way your guy said, founders are super afraid of failing, but they're also not letting the failure stop them. They know full well that the company could die. Like I said 3, 4 weeks ago, our company did quote unquote die, but that I didn't let that stop me. I was like, oh, well, what do we do now? Should I wait? Should I go raise money? Should I figure this out? But that was one of those scenarios where if you don't have the blood or like the itch to keep going and trying to move through the failure, it will swallow you up at some point. Because there's just so many failures in the journey that eventually it's going to overwhelm you. So that's one of those traits that if you have it, mixed with the resilience, mixed with the ability to like find people that can help you get through things, oh, you're in a good spot. Like you can get pretty far as a founder or an entrepreneur.
So, talking about the superpower, you said finding your superpower as a founder. What is your superpower?
Yeah. So for me, it's a little bit of point number two mixed with point number one. I do not like failing. Like the journey of my life thus far, there are very few things that I personally feel like I've failed at, and there's a lot of things that I feel like, oh, I'm satisfied with my success here. I'm going to move to the next thing. It's more often than not that I get to that point of satisfaction. But I don't always get there by myself. I'm very good at like not necessarily convincing, but articulating my vision and my dream and saying, hey, here's how I think you can help. And here's the benefit that you would get from helping me do this and having that be the narrative. So when you're raising money for a company, you have to be very good at that. We didn't just raise $3 million overnight because we just were happy people that people like to be around. We raised $3 million because people thought A, they could make money off of getting money from us, but then also B, that we would use that the right way to help the world and to continue to build something good. And that's a skill. That's not something you're just kind of born with. You have to actually train and get good at that. So those are my two traits, just this weird inability to not like to fail at things, but then also the ability to find the people to help me get to that next point and work with them slash work within myself to get to the next kind of goal and to succeed.
Well, this is like a two-part. Do you think sports helped nurture that? How much did sports play in that?
I do think sports help nurture it. So, to give you background, I played college lacrosse and I played for the Jamaican national team for a little bit. And I'm not a big dude. I'm 5'3", 145, 150 on a good day. And you do not see a lot of those playing at that level in lacrosse or any sport period, unless like your sport is geared towards smaller people. So I was always the person who was kind of like, oh, he's not going to do anything. Oh, like, we shouldn't worry about that. And going into high school, going to college, you step on the field with a chip on your shoulder. And once you get in the field with a chip on your shoulder and you actually start to make some noise and you're like, oh, that shouldn't have happened. How was he able to do that? Or, oh, that kind of hurt. He shouldn't have hit me and that shouldn't hurt. So these are the things that you start to like grow through being an athlete and understand like, yeah, you can come onto the field as a complete underdog and completely blow people away and create the success that you want if you work hard, but then also get smart at using your skills and your talents and like the things that you're good at to like be a good player. Like if we're not even talking about me, like you're seeing some players in the NBA like Nikola Jokic. That man is like overweight. He should not be in the NBA. But he's up for like a
Yeah.
third MVP. Why is he up for a third MVP? Because he's figured out how to use his body and his skills, and he utilizes that in a way that no one else can, and that allows him to succeed. So these are the things that like I think being an athlete really teaches you when you become a founder, an entrepreneur. Use the things that you're good at to get to the next level and succeed.
I think much of it is playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that you were a small guy and when you played lacrosse, people didn't see you as a threat. Do you think that them seeing you as someone who wasn't a threat made you who you are today and that the person who is constantly trying to prove something?
Yeah, I
Because
would say that's part of the narrative, right? Like, even going into founding a company, you're 26, you've never done it before. You're African American. We don't see very many of you guys. We don't have a Stanford or MIT pedigree. Who are you? Those all create the exact same chips where it goes, all right, now I got to prove something. Now I got to go out here and do something you never thought was possible. And all it takes is one shot, one opportunity. And for us, like that was the Y-Combinator opportunity where we had hundreds, if not thousands, but we had hundreds of no's. Like people were saying, no, this isn't going to work. No, we're not going to invest. No, we're not going to use your product. And you got that one shot from the big guys, YC. And all of a sudden, all those no's become, hey, knock on your door. You still raising money? Hey, knock on your door. Can I use your product? Hey, knock on your door. Can I get some advice? Like things start to shift. And that's because you were resilient and continue to work and continue to say, hey, I can do this thing. And once you get to that point where people are starting to ask you for stuff, it's a little bit of a downhill battle. Like now you're no longer the underdog. You're not necessarily like the winner, but you are someone like you can start using resources how you want because people
you have
know.
leverage.
Yeah, you got the leverage. You got the ability to actually move and shake and get some stuff done.
I agree. Because when, for example, with me trying to get people on this podcast, when they say, because I email a lot of people and when they say no, it just makes me feel like, okay, you said no, give me 3 months and I promise you, you're going to be asking me to get on.
Yeah.
I
No,
think,
that's a great mentality to have, man. Like you build up the repertoire, you get the folks. Like not everyone is gonna say no. There are some big people who just say yes, and you give them a shot, bro. You just keep it moving. So I love that mentality, and kudos to you for being that way.
so you mentioned that Y-Combinator was the one who gave you the shot that kind of opened the doors for you. I want to go back to the time when you spent 3 months there, and you said that you had um, group sessions every week, was it?
Yep.
Where 10 founders go in a room and you
Yep.
guys discuss your failures and your successes. But what you mentioned that all these people were extremely hyper focused on their own success. Would people ever try to hide their failures and just try to just show that, oh, this is my success, and they don't want to share their failures even if they learn a lesson, they don't want to share it with you because they secretly want you to fail.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's human nature. Like people love to talk about the successes, which is why we have Instagram and we have Twitter and all these socials. It's honestly just a highlight reel of your life. But we rarely have the like failure platforms, the platforms that encourage that stuff. So that's the same case in YC. Like you have founders who will kind of share they're really successful, but not share that they have like 1 month of money left and that they're really about to shut it all down. And it's unfortunate. I think it comes down to your personal preference. For me, I've always been transparent. Like that's my other superpower where I'll tell you a little bit too much. Like it'll almost disarm you. It'll be like, "Hey Brian, how are things going?" "Oh, it's shit. We ran out of money yesterday." And be like, "What?" Like, how do you respond to that? So I use it as almost like an advantage where I'll tell you our wins, I'll tell you our losses, because you can't necessarily anticipate what I'm going to do next if you know all the information. Like you really just kind of stuck in that way. But some founders do keep it close to their chest, almost as like a, hey, let me just make sure I look good to the public so I can continue to be successful. But it can come back to bite you in the ass. Like if one day you have to come to the table and be like, hey, things actually haven't been that great, that person that you're talking is going to be like, why didn't you just tell me this months ago or a while ago when it first started happening? And that's an uncomfortable conversation to have. So different strokes for different folks on that one.
So, would you say that you guys were a team or in competition? Because from I'm kind of like leaning both ways.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's a team. You have a leader trying to help all 10 of you succeed at the same time. But then again, the 10 of you want each other to succeed to a certain point, but
Yeah.
also not because they want to be above you. So there's like a weird dynamic going on.
Well, that's kind of the beauty of Y-Combinator. What happens if you put 400 really successful, driven people in the same room and have them duke it out for success? Someone's going to come out on top and win really, really big. So that's kind of been their model for a while and why they're such a successful investor. But yeah, it's a bit of a mix and a competition. So in my specific like group, there are friends that I have now who are like we just kind of share each other's success and failures and just like come to each other for support. That's the dynamic we have with them. But then there are some other founders and companies where it's like, I don't really like your business. And because I don't really like your business, I want to be better than your business. So I'll keep tabs on you just to make sure that, oh, you raised some money? All right, bet. I got to go raise a little bit more money so that you know that, like, hey, I can do the same thing you can. So there's like levels of healthy competition. And I think having that healthy competition keeps things edgy, like keeps things succeeding, keeps things moving forward. But the YC is a mix of support and competition and everything in between that.
So you mentioned raising money. Um, I know I have a cousin who has a startup, and I remember she told me that I think she pitched 200 people, and one person wanted to invest or something like that. And I imagine when someone says no to coming on my podcast, if it hurts. And I can't imagine how it feels, or I'm asking you to tell me how it feels when you're asking them for money and like to invest in your idea that's your life, and they say like no.
Yeah. So I think it depends on how you approach it, right? When I first started doing Pigeon, I knew I wasn't a startup person. So when people would say no, my next question would be why? And I learned so much by asking why. The first couple of no's were like, well, we think your company's overvalued, or we don't actually think there's a business here, or how will you make money, or we've never done this before. So every time I asked why, I would also get an answer. And because I got an answer, the next person who I talk to, I could come to the table being like, hey, I already know this might be a concern. Here's my answer
Hmm.
to that. And I kept
So
building that. So after 10, 20, 30 conversations, you couldn't trap me. I knew every single why, I knew every single answer. People would come to the screen and be like, hey, I need to raise $10,000 for XYZ reasons. And then I'd be like, here's why it'll work, here's why it won't, here's what you might be concerned of, here's what you might not. I had every number memorized in the back of my head. So by the end of the conversation, they're like, shit, I guess I should invest because it seems like you figured this out. And that literally started to happen towards the end of the journey where I was like, I'm just investing in you because you know your numbers so well, you know your retort so well. Like, even if it doesn't work out, I'm just prepared to bet on you just to figure out if this thing will work. So that's, I think, an amazing thing that founders tend not to do. They don't ask why. They take the no, they'll feel a little bit discouraged, and they'll keep it moving. If you figure out why, like for example, you're doing your podcast, asking why, hey, you're a new podcast, you're a young kid going at it. Maybe the biggest founders don't have the quote unquote time to do it. So now
mm,
you figure out, all right, you don't have the time to do it. How do I make this worthwhile of your time? You get that answer, and now you go to the next one and be like, hey, I know this might not be worth your time, but let's sit down for 15 minutes. I just need two sound bites. And then they'll be like, all right, cool, I'll give you two sound bites and keep it moving. Those are the things you learn, and then you use the things that have been given to you to improve and succeed in the next round.
I think that a lot of these VC companies, when they invest, well, I've listened to a lot of podcasts about them and investing in general. A lot of them revolve around investing in the person
Mm-hmm.
because if you have the right person, the idea will change,
Yeah,
and if the person is the right person, he will make the idea work. Is that the same view?
I agree. I think investing in ideas only really works if it's the right time. So, for example, there's a lot of AI companies coming out right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably a good time to just invest in AI companies that you don't really know about or who's kind of founding them, just because one or two of them will probably work. But that doesn't always happen. Most of the times, like, we're not in these weird scenarios like crypto or AI where things are just buzzy. Most of the times, you're just building a business. So how do you find the successful ones? Because 99 of 100 fail. You have to start betting on the people. Like, who are the people who will do this for 5, 10 years, even if it's not working? Will try to change things to make it work. Who will come up with new companies and ideas? Because if I go back to another story, like the Airbnb guys, their business when it was starting wasn't working. So what did they do? They got together and started to sell cereal boxes. They started to like make cereal boxes with superhero characters and no, not superhero characters, political characters. So I think it was
Wow.
Obama-O's and McCain-O's because it was John McCain versus Barack Obama. And they sold that at political rallies. And they sold enough money to keep the business running. Like, it's the wildest story. So they were selling cereal boxes to fund Airbnb. And if you're not picking your companies based off of founders like that, 9 out of 10 founders are probably going to give up. Because they're like, we didn't have enough money to keep doing Airbnb, we'll keep it moving. These guys were this special bunch that were like, all right, well, we need to make money. We know people like cereal. Let's just make a funny cereal so that we can make some money so we can keep building our business. Like, that's a weird trait. And when you find those types of people, those are the people you tend to bet on that probably will make it work at the end of the day.
So, from what I've heard, another trait is resourcefulness.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to when you said every time you got a no, you asked why. And for the startup founders who want to have a startup and they're trying to put together their plan and combat some of the and have counter arguments, what were some of the main reasons for why people said no that were kind of broad?
Yeah, so one of the first things I learned and how I got one of these statistics, people were like, well, how many people are actually doing this? I'm not going to invest in a company that I don't know if anyone actually loans money to their friends and family. And I was like, what? I do this all the time with my friends and family. How do you not know this? So then I went to the drawing board and started to get statistics. I was like, oh, $200 billion in the US, a billion around the world. It's a growing market of like 20% year over year. Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, all these guys. So I started to get some stats on that. Another thing for Pigeon at the beginning was like, what happens when people don't pay each other back? I was like, well, I don't know. What does happen when people don't pay each other back? So I started to build those things into Pigeon. I was like, all right, we'll build a contract. That way you can go to court if you need to. Are there other benefits? Oh, there's a tax benefit. If people don't pay you back, you can write that off on your taxes. I'm going to start telling people that. In terms of education, oh, people don't really know how to do this. Maybe if they knew how to do this, they would pay each other back more. And we started to see those maths. So, like, whenever I got a question about something either I didn't have the answer to or didn't know, I would then go out and find the answer or create the answer and then come back to them and be like, hey, look, this is what I discovered. This is where we are now. And sometimes they would still say no because that's just they have their decision to do that. But at least the person who had never said no before, I can go to the table and tell them. And they're like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool to know. What else do you know? How else can I learn? How else can I be a part of this journey and invest?
So the why didn't just help you get investors or build your pitch better. It actually helped you build your product. Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
what you're saying?
Yeah. Use the why for pretty much everything. Building the product, investing, understanding your own ideas. Because if enough people are telling you the same no or the same why, you kind of have to ask yourself, am I looking at this wrong? And if you are
Hmm.
looking at this wrong, great. Now you can go change it and figure out a better thing. If you aren't, then you have to come up with the reasons why you think you're correct and start presenting that convincingly. So either way, you win. You either get a brand new idea or you fix your current idea.
I think that's really interesting. I think your mindset is really, with what you said, you're a problem solver. It's kind of like you see everything as a problem that can be solved, not a rejection,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. So I think a lot of this is mindset. Like to become a founder, become a successful founder, there's a lot of changes you have to make with your mindset, right? What are some of the big changes that people need to make if they want to become successful, not just in startups, but in life in general?
I think you had to be able to like know when to turn it on and when to turn it off, and also recognize that it doesn't ever really turn off. So the minute I started building Pigeon, we're now year 3 and a bit into it, it has never turned off. Doesn't matter if I close my laptop or turn off my phone, like it's either in my mind or it's on my fingertips or someone is asking me about it, it does not turn off. So one of the things that I always try to tell people is be prepared for that. Whenever you're doing your own thing, especially startups and entrepreneurs, you got to learn really quickly how to turn it on and how to turn it off. Because if you don't, it could potentially consume you. And if it consumes you, then you start to not like doing it. Like if I stop enjoying the process, then I'm gonna one day probably say, "Hey, look, this is not for me. Like it's just ruining my life. I don't feel good. I gotta call it quits." And I'm not saying I wasn't like never a part of that. I had to learn that. There was a point in Pigeon's journey where I was like, bro, I really don't want to do this. I'd rather do my 9 to 5, just pack it up at 5 o'clock and call it a day. But I had to talk to some of my investors and be like, look, this is what I'm struggling with. How do I get over this? And I got some good advice where they were like, hey, if you're struggling with this, you got to be able to lead the ship how you feel comfortable leading it. If you drop out of this race, no one is succeeding. None of your investors, none of your employees, none of your customers, everyone's going to fail. But if you stick in this race, but you feel a little bit better doing the race, like you're taking the time to go to the gym, or you're taking the time to like go to therapy, or you're taking the time to just exist and eat the foods that you want, or be healthy in your own life, then it doesn't matter if you spend an hour doing that or 6 hours doing it, you're still in the journey. You're still in the race. So now we still
Hmm.
all have a chance to succeed because you're still doing it. So when he told me that, I was like, oh shit. Yeah, if I start to like prioritize myself and like feel good doing this journey, I could do this forever. If I enjoy doing this, I could do this forever. So when I started to do that, things really started to settle into place where it's like, I get it. this is how you do a company for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, because you're enjoying the journey now. You're like enjoying problem solving and getting through it.
So you should fall in love with the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this way of thinking for you, this problem solving kind of mindset, was it always there since you were young, or was it something you developed later on?
Yeah, I would say it's always kind of been there. Because, like I said, I didn't grow up with many resources. Grew up
Hmm.
probably like one or two paychecks away from being in the projects. Grew up in an area where it's safe, but like you go a couple blocks away, it's not too safe, right? So I always had to be resourceful. I always had to figure out, all right, I'm in this situation. I want to go to a good school, or I want to play lacrosse, or I want to have this, this, and this. How do I get that? And I had to always figure out the solutions to these problems. And at the beginning of my life, you don't always get the right solution. You like consistently fail. But I think the goal for me was always to learn from those failures. And at some point or another, I got so good at learning from failures that I started to succeed when I started to fail.
Hmm.
And then you continue to build on successes until one day you're like, oh shit, I've made it quite far. Like a lot of little journeys equal one big journey. You don't have to make the giant leap at once. You just got to win a little bit at a time. And then one day you look back, you're like, oh wow, we've really accomplished a lot.
I think it's kind of like you don't know the steps after, but if you just keep if you just keep taking one step at a time, you're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
And from all the other people I've talked to, and it seems like independence also plays a big role in being successful because
Yeah.
a lot of the successful people and like people who are focused on the future, they really care about, well, from the young age they had to grow up really quickly because for you it was being having a single mother, you had to grow up quickly because
Hmm.
someone else had to grow up.
Yeah.
And for me, I went to boarding school when I was young, so I had to grow up really quickly as well.
Yeah.
And for some other founders, it was just like they decided they couldn't rely on people, so they had to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And with this massive independence kind of situation, and most kids aren't independent, there's also like the relatability factor.
Hmm.
Did you ever find it hard when you were in high school, college, to relate to people? Because for me, all these people, they're trying to think what they want to do next weekend, but I'm trying to plan 10 years ahead.
Yeah.
It's difficult when I try and talk to them because they love to talk about, I don't know, which celebrity got slapped, for
Yeah.
example. And I find it difficult to like talk to these people because it's like, is this really necessary to be talked about?
Yeah. No, so that's something I learned with age, and it's funny because I'm only 26. So it's a lonely road when you're people who kind of think like us, where it's like, all right, I'm only 18, but I already thought about my retirement plan. Like, I need to save
Yeah.
this and this in order to make it to like
Sometimes I'm thinking of like how I'm gonna raise my kids.
40. Exactly.
It's like a weird situation.
Yeah, it's super weird. People are like, why the fuck are you thinking about that?
Yeah.
But it does help you get ahead, but it is like a slightly lonely path where it's like, man, you gotta have a lot of conviction in yourself and confidence to keep doing that and keep taking your own decisions. But I would say there's also power in being around people who don't always think like you do.
Hmm.
So, for example, like some of my best friends and like even my girlfriend, they're very like a here and now person where it's like, oh, this is happening right now, or oh, this is just a fun time where you can let loose and do stuff. There's a healthy dose of that where it's like, oh, this is life. Oh, you should take the time to just joke about the celebrity that got slapped or something. Take your 5 minutes, enjoy that moment. And once the moment is over for you, go back to what you're planning. Because you want to be able to still exist in the world that you're trying to live through day to day because you may end up missing that whole journey. You could look back at year 50, year 60 and be like, damn, I didn't have fun. I didn't do anything I wanted to. A good example, or I won't say good example, but I remember I seeing it on Twitter. Kevin O'Leary, who's one of the sharks from Shark Tank, he tweeted some really controversial thing where he's like 65 pushing 70. He was like, I may have no friends, my mother might hate me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but at least I have $50 million. And people are like, what? It's like, that's not happy. Like, to him, he probably lived a lot of his life always thinking ahead, always trying to get ahead, but lost out on relationships, lost out on fun, lost out on love, lost out on the things that low key make life worth living. So I think there's a healthy balance. Like people like us were able to really succeed to amazing levels, but what does that come at a cost? Like what is the cost of doing that? And you got to keep that in perspective.
That's crazy because my best friend, he's a very here and now person. Let's go with the flow. And I think the mix is what everyone needs. You cannot have too much of something
Yep.
and too little of another.
Yeah.
Because I think with people like us, it we think too far in the future that we kind of neglect what's happening now. And when I look back on my life, I kind of regret certain times when I could have experienced something new, but I chose not to because I decided,
Yep.
well, I need to force myself and feel the pain right now
Yeah.
so I don't feel the pain in the future, which is, I think, a huge like problem. So, explaining all of this, how would you recommend someone find people like them who you can relate to, especially who are like who are kind of crazy, you know what I mean?
Well, the funny thing is, right, taking out of body experience and thinking about yourself, where would you find yourself if you were looking for more of you? Probably not very
That
many places.
Yeah, that I was thinking like where would I find myself? I think yesterday I was thinking about this in my bed right before I went to sleep, and then I couldn't go to sleep for like 30
Yeah.
minutes. But but it was like if I'm trying to find someone similar to me, they would be in a similar place, but the person in a similar place would be working in their room.
Exactly.
So then, so then,
So when you get to that conclusion, you realize, damn, it's really hard. So what I've been doing in my life is when I find those people, I make sure I know who they are in the back of my head. Like now you, Shen, I know who you are. I'm gonna keep you in the back of my head for quite a while. And if you ever need anything, I'm gonna listen. And if I ever need anything, I'll hope you'd listen as well because they're
please do
very rare.
ask.
Yeah, they're rare. They're very rare types of people. So, not all the time am I trying to like be best friends with them and continue to talk because I know me. I wouldn't want that. It'd be distracting. It'd be like, hey, yeah, I know you want to talk, but like I got shit to do. But what I do respect with those people is always like, all right, you need something, let's talk real quick, let's chat it up. All right, cool. We're going back to the things that we're doing respectively. So I've got a handful of those friends where we don't talk to each other all the time, but I'll see you like once every couple of months, once a year. I'll check in and be like, yo, you're up to some amazing stuff. That's really cool. And I'm up to some amazing stuff. That's really cool. And these are people that I consider like the same thinkers, the brothers and sisters, the people who are like really are trying to move and shake in the same way I am. And those are the people I will continue to support probably most of my life, which is awesome.
So, from what I've seen, it's like we basically have to be strategic with who we kind of talk to because, at least for me, when I talk to someone who, not to say doesn't bring value, but doesn't like I don't bring him value, he doesn't bring me value. It kind of makes me feel like I'm wasting his time, and I don't like doing that. And I think that also translates to like we want to do a lot of what we do in order to help the people around us. Like
Yeah.
I want to build something huge, and I don't even want to do it for the money, but because I always thought, oh, I want to be rich, I want to be rich. But then I realized a couple weeks ago, like, no, I don't really want to be rich. I want to build something and make sure the people around me are taken care of.
Yeah, exactly.
And if that circle is small, so be it. But the smaller, the more for everyone else, I guess.
Yeah, no,
But
makes
then,
sense. Keep going.
but then, um, we have to we when we grow up, we look up to people, and I'm just curious. Um, you had a single mother, so did you look up to anyone that like male figures, or was it just your mom? Because I know people who have single mothers, they praise their mother like she's God.
Yeah. No, so I'm not a huge like idolizer type. I would say growing up, my grandfather was not someone I necessarily looked up to, but someone where I was like, all right, I think he's doing it the right way. I think he's doing decisions in his life where he's taking care of his circle. He's had the autonomy to travel the world. He's learned a lot of things. And he was like living a life that I think you could be proud of at the end of the day. So that was one of those people. But then I also like to learn, not necessarily from celebrities, but I like to learn about their journeys. So, another example, he's not a huge celebrity, but his name was Stuart Scott. He was a big time ESPN anchor who ended up getting cancer and died about 7, 8 years ago. But everything that anyone ever had to say about that man was good. And it's like weird when like you have this big spotlight and no one has a bad thing to say about you. So that was one of those people where I was like, all right, how did he live his life? He lived his life authentically. His whole thing was being this authentic TV sports commentator in a brand new emerging world in the early 2000s. So my kind of thing that I've always done is I don't idolize one or two people. I try to take the best traits of the people that I respect and the people that I say, all right, I think I like the way you're doing your life. If I can figure out those traits and try to emulate them or try to understand how they got to that point, then I can create the thing that I want in myself. Because for me, it's like, I don't know if there is another of me, but I know what I want to be. I know what traits I want to have. So let me start pulling from the places that I know are doing it the right way so I can create me, who I want to be, what I want to become.
I think that's another idea of people like us. We don't see what we have, we see what we could have, and not in a way like, oh my God, I really want that, but I'm in a position where I can't do it. But we see it in a way where it's out of reach, but it's also in reach. If
Yeah,
we can't get it, let's build it
yeah,
in that sense. And you were speaking about like your life and how that guy left this world and everyone had nothing bad to say about him.
yeah.
How do you want to leave this world, or like what impact do you want to leave on this world?
Yeah, I'm a similar boat. You talk about how you want to not necessarily be rich, but get to this point where you have enough means to provide for everyone who you want, regardless of what they ask for, but then also be able to make an impact and create things that touch people's lives. So I'm of a similar boat where it's like, I'm satisfied if my legacy is, damn, that guy like really put his 100% in all and made that shit work no matter what happened. That's the type of rhetoric that I want kind of said about me at the end of the day. Because yes, I'm a hard worker, but I want to be able to achieve and be able to have the wins and share those wins and have other people kind of enjoy kind of the success that I've brought to the table for others. And it's a mix of benevolence as well as a mix of hard working as well as a mix of just kind of being wise about the process. So when it's all said and done, those are kind of the types of words I want described of me. Like, how did he live his life? He lived it in a way that really tried to help the people that was in his circle and the people that he cared about. But he did so in such a way that not many people could touch his level of success. He just was able to really conquer things in a different light, in a different manner.
And I wanted to ask you this question as well. If you have if you have friends who want to do something big, who aspire to be successful, but they struggle with procrastination, they struggle with being lazy. What would you say for them to change? Like what mentality switch to
So
just get off your feet and get going?
it might be two issues, right? So the first issue might be maybe you just need some encouragement. Maybe you just need someone to kick you in the ass and say, hey, it's time to get going and do this thing. So it could be an external factor thing. But I low key often believe If there's something you're being lazy about and there's something you're not motivated about, it's probably not the thing for you. If there's something that you get internal, like motivation and validation from, that's probably the thing for you. So, for example, like, say you're a big time video gamer and you're willing to spend 24 hours a day video gaming without anyone telling you anything. That might be your thing. Even if people are telling you, hey, this you can't make a career out of it, or hey, you can't like do XYZ out of it, maybe take the thing that you know that you love doing 24 hours a day and turning that into something you can get value out of. So those Twitch streamers that are bringing in millions of dollars, probably at one point they were just the gamers who were being told you need to get a job or you need to
Mm-hmm.
do XYZ. They took their thing that gives them internal motivation and monetized the shit out of it, and now they're the guys that are like, oh, how do I become a Twitch streamer? How do I like make money doing this? So I would challenge people who are like quote unquote lazy or people who don't have the motivation to do something to say maybe this is not the thing you should be doing. Maybe you should take a
Mm-hmm.
step back and figure out what is the thing that you do without anyone telling you what to do, without any external motivation.
That's really interesting. And with your startup, like going back to your startup, what was your approach to having the startup? Was it like a everything is planned out, let's do this, let's go, or was it like a Facebook sort of we start quickly, as quickly as possible, we break things, we fix them along the way? What was your approach?
Yeah, it was a little bit of mix of everything. So, like I said, this is the first time I'm doing this. So, I don't have a roadmap. It's like, I've never done
Mm-hmm.
this before. I'm learning this all at the same time you guys are learning it. So, my approach was always being open to doing something else. It was like, hey, we're going to build this feature. It might
Mm-hmm.
work, it might not. And if it doesn't work, we got to figure out why it doesn't work. And if it does work, we got to figure out why it did work. So for me, it's like this constant level of openness is how I kind of run the company. Where it's like, yeah, this is our gut reaction and what we want to do, but is that really the right thing? Did we consider everything? Like, maybe we should do the opposite. Maybe we should think outside the box. And I used to get a lot of slack about that when I first started building Pigeon because people were like, this is not how you do things. This is not how you talk to people. This is not how you raise money. And I'd always be like, yeah, I know. Most people don't do it this way. But like, maybe this will still work. Let's try it. And funny enough, we've now gotten to the point where like the things that I did and the things that I kind of went over that were more unconventional ended up working. And now people are asking me like, "Hey, how did you do that? Why did you do it that way?" Because 9 times out of the 10, you stop trying new things, you stop being open or wanting to push the box a little bit because you're scared of the failure or you're scared because no one's really done it before. For me, I kind of have the exact opposite opinion. That just may be my wiring, where it's like, all right, no one's done it before. Maybe it's worth giving it a shot just to see. So that's how I've been leading Pigeon. We're like a very open and transparent company.
So with Pigeon and all and like your company, is failure a motivator for you? Because failure can be a thing that stops you, or a thing that really lights the fire and starts pushing you up. Because
Yeah, I wouldn't say failure is the motivator. The thing that gets me up every day, which has been the case for most of our journey, is the fact that if we stopped operating as a company, a lot of people would be pissed off, especially our customers. So, if one day I was like, hey, we're going to shut this thing down, the
hmm
investors would be mad. I think we have like 60 institutional ones, and then we raise money from friends and family, so they'd all be pissed. All of our customers, the people that we give the product to, they'd be like, well, what do I do with my loans? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. Our employees, they'd be like, well, I need a job. And I'd be like, oh, sorry. Like, for me, I get up almost every day because I feel like I'm working for all these people. Like, if I do not get up and do this, everyone's going to be screwed. So, my motivation is not necessarily the fear of failure, it's the fear of, like,
letting
and
other
not
people
getting
down.
what they like signed up for. Yeah,
Uh huh.
it's like this weird motivation of like you made a promise to all these people to do this, this, and this. You're not fulfilling your side of the bargain, so you got to get up and do this. Otherwise, yeah, that's on you.
So
So
basically, you're just doing this for other people. You want other people's lives to be better.
yeah, yeah, it's gotten to
So,
that point for sure.
so then you said you did a lot of things differently compared to other people, but if you had to start your startup again, what would be the things that you would do differently in order to build it quicker?
Building it quicker, I actually think we built it quite quickly, so that might not be the thing I would change. Because I built it myself, which I think is the best way to get anything off the ground. Just do it yourself and figure it out from there. But in terms of what I would do as a business, I've learned a lot of business lessons. And I think one of the most important things you should really figure out before you decide to go into business is your business model. That's something that we've been trying to tweak for years, and like we have something, but we're not still fully there. It's like if you're gonna go into a business, how do you make sure this business always exists? Like if you're selling product X for $1 and you're only getting back 50 cents every time you sell it, eventually you're gonna run out of money. It's be like, well, what happened to the company? Yeah, well, we kept selling stuff that wasn't getting us our money back. So it's like as simple as that. If you're gonna start a business and you want to be in the entrepreneurial world or even the startup world, you gotta figure out how to make money one day and how to make the numbers work. Because yeah, you could build something people want, but eventually, because you aren't actually doing it with the amount of kind of economic and money and business model, that thing that people want is gonna have to disappear because you can't provide it anymore. That's what happened to the scooter companies. One day they all,
Boosted? Was it boosted?
not even just boosted, like Bird, Lime Scooter, all those guys.
Uh huh.
They created this giant wave of scooters in every city, in every country, in every location. And people loved it. People wanted it. They were like, let's do it. But the math didn't work out. Like you could buy a scooter for $100 and it costs $200 to maintain for Bird, and then you have to get licenses from the city, which was another $100 per scooter, and then you have to charge them, which was $50 per scooter. So you're only making $7 per ride from these people. It's like, yeah, the company's gonna die eventually. Even though people love the scooters and want it, they couldn't figure out the economic model, and Bird went from being a I think $3 or $4 billion company to last I heard they were 150 million. So they've gone down like 90% or something like that.
So I want to be respectful of your time. So I have just one more question. When you walk into because my cousin told me that on one of the pitches, I think she had to walk into a room with like eight big people, all the big money, and you've got 5 minutes, 2 minutes to pitch, something like that. 5 minutes,
Something
two
like
minutes,
that.
3 minutes. I don't know. And I can just imagine walking in, and it's like walking into the principal's office when you knew you did something bad. It's just like heart starts pounding. What advice would you give for the people who are walking into these rooms?
I think there's two pieces of advice. First is like all these people in this room probably have been in your shoes at one point or another. There are some people who got fed the silver spoon and kind of just got placed there because they just had their family or friends that got them to that situation. But most of the times they were in your shoes working to get to that same point too. So that should like give you some comfort where it's like you don't have to be perfect. You just gotta impress them just enough. You gotta be good enough, remember, to move on to the next stage. The other thing, and this is more of a trick, I've learned like being really good at pitching and convincing people of your ideas, have the people who you're talking to learn something new by the end of the time you're done talking. If you're pitching your idea and they knew everything you pitched, why would they care
Mm-hmm.
to invest? They could be like, I already know it's gonna end. So if you're pitching your
Uh-huh.
company and you're like, did you know this? And they're like, no, I didn't know that. That causes curiosity. And once you have curiosity, now you've got the hook in their mouth. It's up to you to reel it in. It's like, oh, let me teach you some more. Here's some other things that I've understood. Here's how we make money off of this. And then once they're hook, line, and sinker, that's when you get the check.
I know I said that was the last question, but the last one is, you're from North Carolina, was it?
Yeah, correct.
Why did you move to Miami?
I love the lifestyle. So I moved after I was in California doing Silicon Valley slash building Pigeon. Pandemic was halfway over. I was like, look, I love the ability to still meet people who are not part of tech. I love music. I love culture. I love food. Silicon Valley slash California had some of that, but Miami has just been going through a resurgence over the past couple of years of just amazing activity. So I came out to Miami for one weekend just to like check it all out, and I like fell in love with it, man. The weather here is good. The culture, so many different languages and ethnicities and people of all different shapes and colors here. The ability to continue to build your startup in an environment where you feel healthy outside of work is super important to me. But then also being able to still find the time to work and the environment to work in the ways that you want to is also important. So Miami offered a lot of that, and there's a new kind of burgeoning tech scene here, which has been super beneficial for us as a company. But I love Miami. I recommend it for a lot of different reasons. It's maybe not for everyone. Like, it's a different pace of life. Same way New York is not for everyone. Same way LA is not for everyone. But I definitely recommend Miami wholeheartedly.
All right. Well, I know I've been asking you a lot of questions, and I know a lot about you now. Are there any questions you have for me? Or
Yeah, no, so I know you're really gunning to build this podcast into a big thing. What's kind of the original inspiration that got you to wanting to open it up, especially at such a young age, and where do you plan to go with it?
yeah, so when I was when I was young, my mom always told me like, my mom's always been telling me that money is like important. You know, like you have to have a good job to provide for everyone. So from a young age, I've always felt like, oh my God, I need to make money or I'm a failure. I need to make money or I'm a failure. So I learned how to trade stocks and then crypto from like 15 until now, and I've been doing that. And then I've just been trying to find a different way of having a business. And then, funny enough, do you know SMMA?
SMMA? No, I don't.
It's like a online social media marketing agency.
Hmm.
So then you can get someone in India to do a marketing job for $200, and you can outsource, and then in the US you can sell that job for 1,000, and you just make the margin. And I tried starting that, and I would try to get people on the phone to like cold calling, and I would feel so uncomfortable. Like, I don't like selling to these people. If someone did it to me, I'd absolutely fucking hate it. And I was like, how can I build trust with these people to then pitch them this idea and they would actually want to do it? So I came up, okay, I could interview these people, try to find out the pain points in their business, and then I could present it to them after they see like, oh, this guy's legit, I can trust him. So then from there, I was like, I can do a podcast. And then from the podcast, it was like, I can build a brand now. I remember Gary Vee said that a brand is everything.
Yeah.
So then I wanted to build a brand. And then from the brand, I was like, what if every single guest I got on this podcast got put in like a group where they could all contact each other? So then it would be like a super business network. Because I struggle with finding people like me. So I was like, if I can get, and it's also the value. I was thinking, okay, with a startup, in a startup kind of mindset, what value can I provide to these people? And it was like, well, I'm new, I have nothing, so I'm young, probably don't trust me, so I have to say, okay, if you get on my podcast, I'll spread the news about your company. I'll do marketing for my podcast, which is in turn marketing for your company. So it's like, oh, okay, this is no brainer. 2 hours of time, and I get free marketing.
Yeah.
And then the other part was, if people like networks, like secret groups, like, oh, I'm in this, you're not. And people enjoy these little secret groups. So I was thinking like, okay, all my guests, I can put them in a group and they can all like contact each other, and they'll all be these startups. So it's like another Y-Combinator, but it's just a place for advice where no one is trying to outcompete you in that sense. So then I try to get people on the podcast. And
No, I love that.
yeah,
I love that. So in terms of where you want to go next with it, I'm kind of curious. You figured out a lot of things by iterating on it. Do you plan to continue to build the podcast, build the brand? Like, what does this look like for you?
yeah, I'm full on the podcast now. I'm just because college to me is kind. In school, I get good grades. I'm not gonna lie, but it's really boring. It's kind of like hell. It really is hell. I'm sitting there all day and I cannot focus. I have to be on my iPad doing something. I don't, but I still get good grades. So like I just think there's something more than school. I don't want to be an employee. I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a lawyer, and
Yeah.
I don't think college can do much. But I am still going, and
No, I
I'm
love
just
it.
gonna, yeah, I want to build this podcast to something big. I think when I go home for summer, I have interviews lined up with some like people who have VCs and stuff, and it'll just be a platform where people who want to start startups and have a startup can come on and just find advice that is organic.
Yeah. No, no, I agree. I love that concept. And if you're similar to me, like I went through school because I just kind of had to. Like you have to have a degree or whatever. But it's like, ah, I could do this without the degree.
Yeah, I feel like I can learn everything by myself
Yeah,
with some
exactly.
guidance.
Exactly. So I'm of that same mindset. Have you ever heard of the Thiel Fellowships, where they kind of pay you to like literally drop out of college for a year to just build what you want to build and you're committed to?
I've never heard of that. Could you repeat
Yeah.
it? Thiel?
Yep.
Like Thiel?
Yep. And it's started by Peter Thiel, which is the guy who founded Facebook.
Oh, the guy of Facebook, right?
No, PayPal.
Oh, right, yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yep.
he's like a billionaire, something like that.
Yep. Super billionaire. That might be a great opportunity for you. I know you're probably fresh into the college journey, but that was one thing where I was like, I should have applied. I should have at least put my hat in and see. Someone's gonna pay me 100K just to like build something for a year. That sounds dope. And it's a network of an amazing group of people and founders, and they have an amazing track record, probably better, if not equal to YC. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, because I've had to learn everything myself, and I just feel like I want to find people who would do it with me. But where I am now in the position, it's not as easy as like going to a certain place and looking for people because most people my age are focusing on partying.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
No, no, I agree. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate this conversation. This is great. It's probably one of my favorite
yeah,
podcasts I've done. So, what I would say is keep doing it the way you're doing it because not very many people are having such authentic conversations as you are. So,
yeah,
thanks for having me, and I love the time.
yeah. Thank you so much. I hope we can stay in contact.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
I'm gonna end the call, but